very first one.
Life.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. The Newburgh Dundee School District 29J Board of Directors agenda meeting for September 10th is now in session. So calling the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask Director Hayden to lead us in the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We are now going to go recess to executive session per ORS 192-6602E to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions. And before I go any farther, the conflict that I've previously had with this issue is no longer, so I will be staying in the session. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend executive session. Executive session will be held in the superintendent's office. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said about such subjects during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, the Board of Directors will return to open the session. Thank you, and we will return shortly. Okay, we are going to reopen the board meeting after our executive session, and we'll go into the review of the agenda if we have any additions and or deletions.
Are you able to hear me?
Hi, Trevor. Yep, we can, and Director DeHart is on our Zoom link.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the boardroom, but yeah, I would like to add one item for discussion, and that is discussion on the vote last week for changing I guess designating Director Wolfer as the sole person for negotiating legal counsel. I think I need some clarification on the reasons we reached that conclusion.
Don't need a second?
Is there a second?
We don't need a second. Do we have to vote on it? To add an agenda item? Just a minute, Trevor. We're checking on something.
I don't think we have in the past.
Well, we just want to make sure that we're following all of the,
Yeah, I get it.
okay, we're gonna review the policy and we'll circle back to you.
I found it. For policy B DDC. Items of business not on the agenda may be discussed and acted upon if the majority of the board agrees to consider them.
Okay.
So we would need a majority vote.
Okay, so we have a request to
Is that just clarification on the policy? Is that to act on something
That's
or to discuss something? I just
that
wanna make
is
sure that we're
to
gonna treat the same.
add anything to the agenda requires a majority of the board per that one. It does not, for removing something from consent agenda to go to the regular agenda does not require a majority, but to add an item to the agenda that's not already on there.
Okay, so it sounds like we need to take a vote as to whether we want to add a discussion about the vote that we had designating one individual to work on negotiations. I will call for the vote. Oh, I need-
Ask if there's a second.
Is there a second?
Second,
Any further discussions? And we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
sorry, aye.
We have 3 ayes opposed.
Nay.
Nay.
Nay. Okay, the motion carries and we have just,
Motion does not carry.
the motion does not carry. So what I would like to do for the viewers is that we've Director DeHart, Director Allen, and Director Hayden voted in favor of adding it to the agenda. Director Nichols, Director Woodward, Director Bridges, and Director Wolfer voted not to add it to the agenda. So we will not be adding it to the agenda. Thank you for everybody and looking at policies and making sure that we're moving forward. So we're going to move on to the consent agenda. It's a pretty hearty consent agenda, including the board minutes. We have some personal service contracts. And if there are some things, if Superintendent Radish, if you wanted to just sort of highlight some of those things.
Yes, just briefly for the board. The personal services contracts are not an unusual request, and we have Amy Stevens here, who is the coordinator for special programs, if you have a specific request about any of those contracts. Under letter F, ESS substitute rates, We already have an agreement with ESS. They're our substitute service, and their rates has increased every year. And what we're doing is we're asking the board approval to approve the addendum that identifies those rates that are in your packet. You have donations, and I think that Chair Bridges will read those donations when we get to those. There's some excellent donations on behalf of our students for supplies and so forth. That's item G. We have two lists of surplus items we'll be requesting, and the district is currently gearing up for a fairly large surplus sale, hopefully in mid-October. But we have a lot of work ahead of us because there's a tremendous amount of inventory, including up in our attic. It's been there for a number of years. It needs to be offloaded to make room probably for more surplus at some point. The Key Club, which is a great club at Newburgh High School, this summer met and decided to raise their fees. The board approved fees last spring. You approved $15 for the Key Club fee, and the Key Club has decided to raise their fee to $16. So we're asking the board to approve the Key Club's change. And then the last one is relative to billing for Medicaid services. This is a group that has been used by other districts across the United States, and they will assist us in Medicaid billing. Their return comes from some of the billing, and the district also gets some return for that. So those are the items. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you have, and also ask Mrs. Stevens to respond to any of the contracts that you may have questions about.
Yeah, I'm curious about the bar program.
If you go sit over right by Audrey.
Thank you for asking that question. BAR stands for Building Assets and Reducing Risks. It is a framework that helps us in collaboration within our educators to be able to support the academic and behavioral needs of our kids. And it is something that we're receiving through grant funding. And we will be covering more too, just in our, as we're talking about our behavioral health pieces.
So you did say that it's covered by grant funding.
Grant funding, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. And that'll be for our secondary schools.
Is that a program we've used in the past?
We've used it at Newburgh High School for the past 3 years, and have Ms. Iran can also share too, just the strengths that we've seen in our On Track to Graduate, and just the work that helps our teachers be able to connect with one another and support the growth of our kids academically.
I have a declaration of a potential conflict of interest on something on the consent agenda, so I'm not sure how to take myself out of that. I have a family member who is employed by ESS. So I believe it would be an actual conflict because we are approving the rate. But because that is a piece of the consent agenda, I don't know how to remove myself from that. But I could remove myself from the entire consent.
Would it be worthwhile moving that to the
Action
items?
Okay,
Yeah, and that doesn't need a majority. That can just be done if someone requests it.
I move that we move the ESS substitute rates for 2024, 2025 to the action items.
Thank you. And I will remove myself at that moment.
I don't think you need it. It just needed to be requested. I think we did the last meeting when Director DeHart wanted to move something. So just by request, it's been done.
okay, so I've added it to the end of the board action items. And thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate that.
I do have just a general question, nothing about basically resignation hires. So in the past, Dr. Phillips has defined any hires or resignations. In June, the first round of RIFs that he declared there were people that resigned but were first on the callback list. I don't see anybody added, or I don't see anything under resignations or hires. And I've heard that I guess whatever the rehire list we had, we're almost through that already. And I'm just wondering if that's something that should be included in this or provided to the board as an update. So,
The board has received the prior resignations. We had one resignation to bring to the board this evening. However, it's an employee who's on a 60-day hold. And what that means is that the district is not required to release that employee for 60 days if we are unable to fill that employee's position.
sure.
So therefore, we decided not to bring that this evening to the board.
Okay.
The board has received the entire list of reduction in force. You have the employee's last name and first initial,
Sure.
and you have their job. So that was not you had it actually, I don't know if it's in a board packet, but it was shared with the board.
Great, sure. And then that's fine. I guess my more focus was, have we rehired anybody from the short call list or whatever that list is called?
Absolutely.
And then should that be maybe be offered to us to say who has come back or what positions were filled from that short list?
If that's the desire of the board, we can provide that report, yes. I can't do that tonight, but
Sure.
I can get that for you for the next meeting if you prefer.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank
And do you need that by name or just position?
Well, again, in the past, and I know different superintendents do things differently. We were told what was hired, rehired, or contract extensions or whatever were all under that letter A.
And
So
it did include
and
names.
do include names.
That's not a problem. It's, the recall is, as you know, is very complicated. And do you only want licensed employees?
No, I think that in the past, we've had all employees that have been hired or,
All right, we'll do our
Sorry.
best to get that list ready, and it
Okay.
changes every day.
Yeah.
So
No,
we
that's
have
fine.
to pick a point in time and decide which list you want and what date.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any more comments or questions about the consent agenda? Thank you, Amy. I would like to point out, because this is just fabulous, so Lois McLean has donated $300 for school supplies. Mary Lou Gouger has also donated $300 in school supplies. The Wayside Friends Church, Elizabeth Sherwood is the co-lead pastor, has donated $1,500 in school supplies and $500 to the Catalyst Resource Room. Now, those are fabulous, great donations, and certainly appreciate it. What we don't have captured here is all of the people in the community who have responded in such a positive way to every Amazon wish list that has gone out from teachers, school secretaries, PE teachers. I just keep seeing the requests going out and the requests being very graciously filled. I know there's one about art supplies. There was one about playground balls, helping, teachers who have been reassigned to a different grade level get their classrooms ready. And it has been very touching to have the community respond in such a amazing and generous, positive way. So I'd like to just extend that to everybody. Okay, so having said that, we've just identified all these things and we've moved something into the action items. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that the Newburgh School District Board of Directors approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? Not. I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. And Trevor said aye, so it's unanimous. Thanks, Trevor. Okay, thank you. Now is the time for the public forum. If we have anybody that wanted to come forward and speak to the board, address the board, now would be the time to do it. No? Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, so Elaine Costello, would you please come up And if you could come to the podium and make sure you turn on the microphone and speak nice and loud. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Elaine Kotzkela. I am a Newburgh resident and former staff member. First of all, I just want to say y'all are doing an amazing job in a really hard time, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate that not everyone agrees on everything and that we can talk about it, that you can talk about it. Having said that, when I read the agenda, I noticed that there was some complaints on there that I have some deep concerns about. And I'm going to try to talk about it without being very specific, but I want my deep concerns to be noted because I'm hearing this from other people as well. So I'm actually going to start when the whole packet came out. I noticed, this is going way back in time, but that you have in the packet a complaint from former board member Rebecca Pyros, and that you are going to be dealing with that. I read her complaint and I mostly just was like, oh, she was stating some things for herself, but she could have been stating them for me. And this is frankly old hurts from me, but I want to read them. Her complaint filed in 2002, it looks like. The school board repeatedly failed to process complaints in accordance to the district's complaint process. I experienced that. So yeah. And then also regularly heard anonymous complaints that were not submitted in accordance to the district's complaint process. I am just naming because it feels right to do that. I have watched you guys deal professionally with complaints that I think border on harassment. And it's been hard because I had complaints that were completely ignored. So thank you, but I'm just naming that. The other thing I want to talk about is I was not at the meeting where there was an exchange between two board members about what is now a complaint in here, but I watched it. I watched this exchange that was a board member mentioned that they had talked to Dr. Phillips, actually said they called him. That really concerns me. That shouldn't happen. And I remember watching it afterwards and going, what is this? This really doesn't seem right. And then now there's a complaint in it. And this is what I'm going to say. I read your lawyer's responses, and I think you're handling it really, really well. I want to say that the complaint seems really off to me based on the meeting, and that my big concern when I read it is like, who wrote this complaint? This complaint doesn't sound like it was written by someone who was actually listened to the meeting. And that's just a noticing, but that deeply concerns me with what's happening, deeply concerns me. And I think people are pretty frustrated at this point that it just appears that there's a lot of manipulation going on. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm sorry if that was negative, but yeah. Carry on.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking. Okay, so let's move on to action item. Well, reports and presentations and discussion items. Personal electronic device policy update, JFCB, CEB, Director Wolfer and Principal Arion. Would you like to come on up? Come on up. You can take a seat at the table and
Thank you for being here. We discussed this a little bit I almost said last week, but that's how it feels like 2-3 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. And I asked Principal Arion, we had a couple of conversations, and I know the board had a lot of questions about how this might actually look and a lot of questions that I couldn't specifically answer. So I had asked if she could be here in our last discussion yesterday. and discuss some things. So floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for the invite. As Director Wolfer indicated, we had a conversation, two brief conversations, and the discussion around personal electronic devices or cell phones is not a new conversation at the high school. We've been having this conversation for quite a while because especially over the past couple of years, we have seen such an increase in cell phone distraction in the classroom that it is impeding students' ability to learn. And not just the students who are looking at the phones, but their colleagues as well. So we've had the conversation for quite a while. We would love to see some shifts in what our personal electronic device policy looks like. But we also know that we have to be thoughtful in how we roll this out, how we collect information, and move forward. So I have just a couple of things that I just jotted down thinking about this. In terms of some of our conversations around why we would like to see a little more rigid personal electronic device policy, distractions is number one. We see that the actual academic time is decreasing because there's a lot of redirection over and over and over again because students have cell phones out and they're using it not for academic purposes. This is a common one, and I think it's a big and very relevant complaint from parents is that there's an increase in cyberbullying, students taking pictures and videos of other students and, promoting those out in the ether, the social media realm per se. Lots of issues around mental health, I think, as a result of that. In addition to just seeing some changes in how our adolescents are developing socially and having difficulty interacting face-to-face with people. So we do feel like that there's an impetus for having this conversation. I'm a firm believer in the theory that to go fast, sometimes we have to go slow. And I think we have to, like I said, be very thoughtful about this. So I know that at the high school, our approach around changing our policy is really from a perspective of being preventative and not punitive. We do feel like we're seeing some changes in students and the way that they are able to cope and deal with their academics and their social lives. And we're hoping that this will be seen as not taking away phones, but rather just improving the academic outcomes for students and their social experiences at the high school. So through the course of, observations in the classroom, seeing how prevalent the distractions are and students becoming off task, and then taking a look at some extensive research, my colleagues and I have discussed how we might move forward in talking about this. And one of the thoughts that we had was perhaps putting together a small committee that is inclusive of a few students, some staff members, and parents to start delving into some of the research and having discussions. In addition, we have a lot of local school districts who are embracing a new and more restrictive personal electronic device policy. And so I think it's important that we do some outreach with those districts. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. And so we can reach out to those districts and solicit input about what's working and maybe what some of the challenges are. And then I would like to probably employ the help of Claudia Stewart after this small committee gets together and we conduct some research, figuring out how we might be able to solicit input from parents around maybe some language that we could eventually come back to you with as part of a revised policy. But I appreciate Director Wolfer's interest in this and bringing it forward. I think he has a unique perspective as a parent and as a school resource officer. I will tell you that the issues at the high school are not unique to this district. In talking to colleagues, this is quite an issue with most any high school, frankly, in the nation. That's why it's it's so prevalent in the national news right now. At the elementary schools, not quite as much, because not very many elementary schools have personal electronic devices. And then at middle school, I think they also have a pretty good handle, because again, many students have personal electronic devices, but not 90+%, which is what you probably see at the high school. I think also important to note is that I hear concerns of parents about what if my student doesn't have the cell phone in the classroom? And I want to wrap back around to, we're not interested in pursuing this option to limit contact between students and parents. Students would still have access to be able to contact parents and vice versa. It would look a little more old fashioned for those of us who are old enough to remember that era. And I also think that there are probably some exceptions, and I think we have to be careful in thinking about what those exceptions look like, where some students may need to continue to carry personal electronic devices. But that's just kind of what has been ruminating in our heads. It was a great conversation yesterday with Director Woofer and with my assistant principal, Ben Patterson, who is helping kind of lead the charge in having conversations about this. So I'd be happy to answer questions or engage in further discussion.
I have a question. So you kind of referenced that parents have talked. Have you heard from very many parents since we had talked about it 2 weeks ago? Because I as a board member haven't had received any communication from community members, and I just was wondering. And then before you answer that, I would recommend that we have two fabulous
We sure
you representatives of the school board that are hanging out in your building. So I would encourage you to seek their guidance and participation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have not heard from any parents to date. And I agree, these two, in addition to maybe a few more students, would be amazing representatives to start having that discussion.
I know that when we spoke yesterday, you both were talking about also for emergencies. I know that was been a concern of parents being unable to reach them. Some of the options that you were looking at that, we talked about it. We might do something at a policy, be a policy shift to that the district will be moving to de-emphasizing these, but at the actual implementation policies will be done at your level. And some of the options you talked about were, a grant for some of those yonder pouches that we've seen work well at other schools, or even we've seen some where they have to put them in like at the back of the room in a sleeve. And so if an emergency, because that's been a concern we've heard from parents, if there was a big emergency and lockdown in a school, having the kids could still get access to them if they had a medical emergency, but with them being in there, they wouldn't be taking them to the bathrooms and filming fights or doing drug deals or the other issues we're seeing, or even just the cyberbullying. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We have no intention of taking away cell phones, but what we would like to see is some policy around the spirit of not having cell phones out during academic time, and whatever that looks like, whether it be yonder pouches or the sleeves, to be able to just put those away and couch them and be able to really engage actively with our students around instruction. That's really the goal. So those phones would not be very far away from students.
Thank you, Ms. Ariane, for providing some input. I'm still gonna play devil's advocate, like I did last time. This time more from an IT brain standpoint. I know that the weeks heading into the, where the kids weren't there, but teachers were there trying to get things set up. I heard that even some Chromebooks that were, the student Chromebooks, they were requiring two-factor authentication. Now I think that got resolved. Kindergartens don't, maybe they're iPads, but second graders, they don't have cell phones. They can't do two-factor authentication. So this is a question not just to you, to anybody, maybe Dr. Radich, maybe to our IT person over there monitoring the call, the video. But is there an IT need that we need to have? Some kids need to have access to to a, to a device for authentication. We had to put in a policy or whatever to do that. I know for me, it's not every day. For me to access like my account and email is maybe once every 21 days, something like that. But I'm just wondering if there's some IT hurdles that we also need to make sure that we don't have to have, or I guess gives the kids opportunity to say, oh, I'm just needing it because I need to log in, right? And because I do agree that we need to get it out, but I think there are some other maybe just smaller hurdles that we need to make sure that we are tackling this from all angles and perspectives of, making sure that we lessen the need that the kids say they have for having their phones out. So.
I think you bring up a very important point, and that is that part of this would have to be some very strategic work with our tech department to make sure that students not having their cell phones, at the ready in classes would in any way impede their ability to access information in their Chromebook, their Clever accounts, things of that nature. So I think that would have to be part of the equation. And we would need to make sure that we have working, functioning one-to-one Chromebooks for every student. So I think that's going to be a challenge, but one that I think is doable. So, and this guy has been amazing, just so you know.
If I might throw out a suggestion, I know I use a Duo key fob for all of mine. I don't know if that's cost prohibitive or not, but oh, perfect. Well,
For those who didn't hear it, it was said that students will not be required to two-factor.
I do want to thank you for being a part of this, because I think that it's a critical piece of putting out a policy that we don't just say from our level, like, stop, and then there's no way to have enforcement or an understanding with the different buildings and teachers and administrators on that. So I really appreciate that, because I think that it's clearly a huge issue and something we need to get under control. But I think that your involvement and other people in the district is just exactly what we need to make something have teeth in this. So thank you.
Do you have any idea of what your timeline would be to get a committee together and to, kind of move us along?
Yeah, so I think we probably could pull a committee together pretty quickly. I'm thinking sometime in the, within the next month or so, and begin some of that work. I already have some collected research, some of it that I've shared with Director Wolfer, and we can start to dig into that. I think the other thing I really want to do is take some time and reach out to some of my colleagues who have already embraced this change in practice and get some input from them as well. So I do think that we could begin movement pretty quickly. Not to say that, we have to make policy change pretty quickly, but I think we could have some good working suggestions for the policy committee within the next couple of months.
One of the things too we talked about in our meeting yesterday was that this will also help our district not be behind the curve, because we could say all we want. If we decide to do something that's not restricted, the state is coming out with something, and they could come out with something in the spring that says there are no phones in schools, period, or something, right? So we just want to make sure that we have the most research back, most common sense thing that we can, so that we can have what works for us and hopefully not be behind any 8-ball.
And I would just push back a little on that part of the problem here is that when we do make policy that can't be followed, it makes that policy void. Whether the state says you can't have cell phones, that doesn't change that cell phones are in schools. So it feels like instead of getting ahead, like getting it right. I would much prefer to go down that route of just making sure that when we want to do this, and there's education among parents and students, as Director Nichols had brought up, that I think that that's more important than trying to get ahead of it.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's kind of where I was going with it too, is that as long as if we're doing it this route and going through committee and going through that is we should have the best solution for us, and which I would hope would be better than whatever the state's one size fits all would be, and hopefully will be a lot better solution for us. Like you said, get it right. So
Thank you for being here and for all of this. I would like to add that in addition to the committee, which I think is vital to have teachers and students and parents, and but if there's an opportunity to hear from all of the educators in the building, maybe via digital survey, just because I know teachers can't, not everybody has time to serve on committees, and we're all balancing everything that we can. But I think some opportunity for the educators in the building to give feedback across the board would be beneficial.
And so I did ask, I don't know if some of the board did receive an email from a teacher who's on the NEA. And so I reached back out to the NEA, and I did ask if they would be willing to get some feedback from their membership as well, for us as the board and for the policy committee and things, so that we can have some of that. And so Mr. Gallagher said that he would reach out and see if they can compile some feedback from the teachers on what their thoughts are on this.
And then I would just like to put in a request that coaches can't text their students during school time.
I think that is an incredibly reasonable request.
I think also just a note for the listening public that we do still want to hear from all of you, and our emails are open. It doesn't have to be on a specific form, just whatever thoughts you have. We would love to hear them.
We good? We good? Okay. Thank you so much for coming and for helping us tackle this. This is very important policy. Yeah, thanks. Okay, let's invite up. We're going to talk about behavioral health supports. So if we can have Amy and Dr. Jerry come up. If you guys want to come to the podium, that might be easier for you. And remember to turn the microphone on and
Hey, thank you for having us. I'm Amy Stevens, and I'm our Behavioral Health and Special Ed Coordinator for our district.
And I'm Dr. Jerry Turgeson. I'm a psychologist and lucky enough to work with the district again this year.
And we're here to just provide a brief overview of how the systemic processes for embedding behavioral health, and just a little bit about what that programming looks like for us. There we go. So as I shared, sharing our systemic processes and the overview of our current services. So a big thank you to our community partners, Providence Medical Group, Yamhill County Health and Human Services, Lutheran Community Services Northwest, and also to our grant contributors, Austin Family Foundation, Oregon Health Authority, and Yamhill County Care Organization. These partners are amazing in being able to provide the funding for our frameworks and for our staffing, and for our partners as we're able to be able to bridge the assets that we have within a community, to be able to make one another stronger and to really build the learning experiences for our kids. So very thankful for the intentional collaboration that we're able to engage in our community. So guiding principle is the work of our behavioral health is supporting the academic growth of our students. And we capture this within our integrated plan, most specifically within our priority 1 and 2, as we're looking at how we're supporting our attendance for our students and the work that we do around providing the consistency, clarity, and support for students. We are helping to provide strong learning experiences for our kids. This work helps us to have just a clear understanding of the purposes in our work as we're having conversations and collaborations with our community partners as well. So to share some of the work is, as I shared just a moment ago around the BAR building assets and reducing risks. There are frameworks that support just everybody. And some of that looks like having clear expectations for what school looks like, and teaching what those expectations are and modeling those expectations. That work helps us to have strong learning experiences for our kids. And we value that, and we have that a part of our work here at school. We also have ways of providing interventions that include small group work, that helps building skill building, and then also just being able to pull in on our resources that we have within our community to be able to provide for the behavioral health needs for our kids. So kind of what do those systemic processes look like? The key pieces are that we are intentional about collaboration. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to have really productive conversations within our buildings, within our professionals, and how are we going to have really productive conversations with our community partners? And then how are we going to be really intentional about putting our very valuable resources in place through our tiered systems of support? So this is just simply the tiered systems of support. And I did call attention to this just a moment ago too, just in that we're making sure that all kids are being able to get the foundational pieces, and that we have ways of being able to intervene with kids as we can support some skill building to help them be able to be strongly engaged in their learning. And then being able to understand when we have a more tier 3, a more intensive need, and how we can partner with within our community to provide more intensive services for kids that require that. So the big pieces are collaboration and partnership. And so I just want us all to be mindful of that as we're hearing more from Dr. Tergeson in terms of what that programming is looking like, and just some really amazing things that we have happening in our schools because of our community. So our systemic approaches to care, we did some intentional work around this last year. We've had just a shared agreement with our community, and we built on that in this previous year to really call out what our school counselors can do and how we can bring in school-based therapists to be consistent in how we're providing those services across all of our buildings within our district. And then to be able to help and build the capacity of one another. So as we come into the work, we can learn from a school-based therapist and the work that they're doing with students, as well as we can from a school counselor, and just some of that work that we do to support one another as we're being intentional in the work. So that is not good.
Wow. What happened?
Okay.
That was exciting.
I don't know what I did. Sorry. No.
Can I just ask a question while we're getting
Yes,
check on?
please. Thank you.
So how are parents engaged with these kids? I was
Yeah.
listening to NPR today, and the Surgeon General was a really fabulous interview about the Surgeon General's declaration that parents are incredibly stressed and it's a health
Yeah.
concern. And then, that ripple effect of what we're expecting out of parents to have kids be successful in school, and the kids' stress coming from home to here, and just wondering sort of what that full circle looks like.
So I think some of those have to do with our integrated plan too, that within that attendance piece is just being really intentional about what that regulation is. And so how does a learning experience look like for someone that is able to put in some practices that help them regulate? So just being mindful of the fact that we have a stressful world, and it's our job as educators to be able to be mindful of that and know how we can deliver learning that is in a way that's supporting regulation for kids. So some of the things that we're doing are skill building for kids, and just being cognizant of the fact that we're partners with families, and we're wanting to make sure that that we're attending to what specific needs are for kids, so that way we can make sure that they're getting what they need in the classroom. Anything else to share?
That's it. And then the piece that I might add from my perspective is that when we're doing that individual therapy work with kids, we are really intentional that we are thinking about kiddo-centered and family-centered approaches to care, that we have the kids for 30 minutes to an hour a week for therapy, sometimes every couple, 3 weeks, depending on the age and the need. And the rest of the time, they're either in their classrooms or they're at home with their families. And so we're really working to involve families in care, thinking about family plans, thinking about ways that we can support and resource families to just ease some of those day-to-day burdens and make sure that we're resourcing families as part of caring for kids is really our big goal. It's hard to parent right now. There's a lot happening. So I'm gonna, sorry. Okay. So I'm gonna talk just a little bit about what we have this year and some of the programming that we're working on. So I think one of the things that's been so meaningful about the work with Newburgh and supporting the community is that it really does take a team to support a district. We have a lot of kids, we have a lot of families, and we have a lot of need. And so the way that our community has really come together to support and resource the school district has been amazing. So Providence Medical Group continues to be our medical sponsor for the school-based health center. And so we do have physical health and then behavioral health services that are on site at that school-based health center. Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Our physical providers are there in person from noon to 5. So it's a really great way to get a lot of kind of basic needs met. And then we've been able to scale out from there and provide more services on site. So our partnerships with George Fox University and Pacific University have been incredible. We're outreaching with our interns. Currently, they're going to be supporting elementary, middle, and high school students this year. Yamhill County Health and Human Services. Robert is wonderful. So he's at the school-based health center full-time. We have a grant that we wrote last year. I think we gave y'all like a sneak peek in January. We ended up getting $207,000 of funding from the Oregon Health Authority. Amy and I are developing some solid grant writing skills. So that is helping to support the district hiring of a CADC that's providing substance-specific intervention for our 6th through 12th grade students. And then Lutheran, they chatted with you all last time. They're wonderful. They are supporting 3 of our elementary schools. And then, of course, the incredible work of our resource rooms and all of the volunteers that go into supporting. So we're really trying to be mindful in expanding services and being kind of population focused, but also individuals focused to support as many kids and families as we can with the resources that we have.
And I would just like to shout out to Lori Allen, who just opened the resource room at Catalyst. This is very exciting. So that was one of the
Amazing.
last schools to get one, and they're open 2 days a week. So that's very exciting.
Amazing. So just some of the highlights of our behavioral health services and the kind of operationalizing and the partnerships that we've done. So the complex case consultation meetings, those are happening monthly. They're comprehensive meetings that are like myself, the behavioral health team. Sometimes we have medical providers that come, school staff, counseling. If anybody that sees the kiddo on the staffing list that really feels like they want to participate in supporting that kid. Again, it's kiddo-centered, it's family-centered. How can we all really collaborate to ensure that we're meeting the needs of this kiddo to help them be successful from an emotional health standpoint, an academic standpoint, and then coming up with some really intentional structured planning and follow-up out of those meetings. One of the pieces that we added on at the end of last year that I'm really excited about for just intentional monitoring, our risk assessments for youth who are having suicidal ideation have been included as a mandatory coverage on those complex case management meetings so that we're really able to monitor. This kiddo had a risk assessment at the beginning of the month. We had a plan that they'd have a touch-in twice a week with these providers. How is that going? Is that still the right level? Do we need to step up, step down so that we're not losing any kids through cracks and that we're really able to make sure that all of the planning that we put in place is the right plan for the right kiddo based on their needs as we move throughout the school year. I already mentioned our CADC, which is amazing. George Fox and Pacific University both continue to be amazing partners. This year, we have 8 doctoral candidates that are spending a training year with us. 2 of them are returners, which always just makes my heart warm because that means that they had such an amazing experience that they begged their school-based directors to let them stay with me for another year. Our part-time interns are 8 hours a week and our full-time interns are 16 hours a week. That's a minimum. I can tell you that they all spend substantially more time on site because they are really committed and dedicated to the students that they're serving. So they're always, all of them are going to be tomorrow for a 90-minute meeting and none of them, they're all volunteering extra time to be there. So this is their minimum time that they're dedicating. We have 8 of them this year. 7 of them are kind of full-time therapy. 1 of them will be split doing therapy and assessment, and then they all kind of pick up additional assessment hours. So that assessment means that they're able to offer their services to help support our school psychology team, providing comprehensive academic assessments for kiddos who maybe need evaluation for an IEP, or there's a question around a possible autism spectrum disorder, that they're able to come alongside and help. You have a lot of kiddos with a lot of needs and a lot of hours of testing that needs to be done. So they're really able to partner with our SPED team and our school psychology team. We did 5 assessments over the summer. I tried to count really quick before I got here. I think we did 10 assessments in support with our school psychology team last year, all of which is at no cost to the district. So it's really amazing, the scope and quantity of services that they're able to offer. We also had some really great success last year with group visits. So especially at the middle school, we did some anxiety visits for kiddos. So they were group-based, so they really got to develop skills and resiliency tools and strategies together in addition to those individual therapy visits, which was really exciting to see. So we're hoping to continue building and growing assessment and intervention and group-based supports and family supports and just try to fill in gaps in as many spaces as we can. Oh, wrong way every time. Our alternative suspension program, our CADC, has been an amazing support. She provides supports to kiddos and families as well when that's the ask. It's voluntary programming, so our high school and middle school administration really lead this up, that they identify a kiddo who's maybe been caught on site with some substances or has some substance related concerns, and then as part of a collaborative conversation with the family, offer engagement in CADC or substance focused programming as an alternative to suspension, which is a really great way to keep kids in school, keep them resourced, and really address some of the underlying components of maybe why they're using substances. And then Yamhill County Public Health has their nicotine prevention programming, which is an evidence-based programming from the National Heart and Lung Association that is used nationally. And their public health team has been really great at sending for free a gal out to help facilitate those groups when we need them, which has been, again, a wonderful resource to help support and augment and keep kids in school. Standardization of risk assessment. This one is always near and dear to my heart. This is how I got started working with y'all 8 years ago now. So we have worked really hard to develop a standardized process for how we approach and support kids who are presenting with suicidal ideation or suicidal risk factors. So last year we put together a standardized process. It was super collaborative with all of our counselors kind of coming together around how do we language, how do we ask these questions? And we now have a standardized document that is utilized across the district for what we call our level 1 evaluations that are done by school counselors or administrators for any kiddo that's presenting with risk. All of those comprehensive assessments are then staffed by Amy and myself. They get uploaded to a folder where we're able to track and monitor them. I review all of them. I follow up with the school if they need additional support and resources. We review all of those risk assessments as part of our complex case management meetings to make sure that families have the information they need, that we're resourcing kiddos, that we're getting them plugged into care. And our goal is really to make sure that we have an evidence-based, collaborative, and trauma-informed approach to supporting our families who kiddo or a family member is having suicidal ideation. We have really solid now evidence-based documentation and notification processes, and then standardization as far as what do notices look like going out to families? How do we support those families in a trauma-informed conversation around this is a risk assessment that happened with your kiddo today based on some things that were said on the playground, and here's our recommendations for how to follow up. And then referral and outcome monitoring. So we are on day 4 of the school year, and I have been involved in 4 high-risk risk assessments so far. That doesn't include the risk assessments that our counselors are doing independently on their own where they don't need me. So I've done 4. Well, and supported for. So there's a huge need. There's a lot happening in life right now. And so I think the more that we can just be mindful and have conversations and make sure we're wrapping around kids, it's essential.
And I think too, some of those pieces too, is we're supporting one another. The processes that we have to get people together to have those discussions and using the structures in place are really supporting our staff as well.
Yes.
And so those are some key pieces for us. So, yeah.
And then we're trying to be super sustainable over the long term, really building relationships with community partners, kind of ongoing district-centered work with where can we have QMHP support that lives within the district. I think it's really important to me that the program's not based on a single human, but that this is something that can continue to be sustainable across, oops, I bumped something, across the long term. What else? We are looking at potential billing and reimbursement for Medicaid services to see if we can help with some cost offset for the district, which I think will be amazing. And then Amy and I are fast and furious with writing grants. We've got a couple out and are looking for more. So if anyone wants to send us grant applications, we'll take them.
Thank you, everybody. Yes.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you. That is incredible work. And it's sad that you've already done 4. But it's very understandable
also-
considering, our world. But does anybody have questions, comments? Anything for these ladies?
I just want to echo the thank you for the work you're doing. I see it in my job too. It's every day, and it's not surprising you've already done 4, but it's just really nice to see that we have that because not every school does. So.
Right, exactly. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, not yet.
All right, yes, go for it.
Just more gratitude, obviously. Very, very grateful, but especially calling out the assessment piece. I know that can be a huge hiccup for families and for educators to, we know we've got to get an assessment done, but it can just be so hard to navigate. And any work that you all are doing to streamline that is really important. So thank you very much for that.
I'd just like to echo my appreciation and thanks to the two of you for your leadership. I think back to the years I was here 12 years ago, and we didn't have even close to the supports that are in place. And you and others have built those over the years. And it's really a benefit to our young people and to our families. So I want to thank both of you for carrying the work forward. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Hey, I have one question. Sorry, I don't have my video on. I'm in
No,
the
that's
middle
okay.
of a cold, but I'm just curious, in your years of doing this, do you see a theme? I mean, is there any preventative action measures? Any themes that we're seeing, any new ones that we've seen over the years?
Like preventative, I don't know if this is answering your question, so please clarify if I'm not. But I think a bulk of it is the preventative piece in that we're looking at how to bring a way for classrooms to be able to have that classroom community, that structures to be able to support our staff, like was mentioning with bar and rulers, just being able to have some intentional ways for staff to be able to collaborate. And I think that part is preventative because it helps us be able to work together really well and be able to understand what the needs are of kids and be able to make sure that all the foundational pieces are in place and then be able to be quick in terms of interventions.
Yeah, and that it kind of answered part of it. I
Okay.
guess, have you seen kind of the root cause, a general theme? I know as we talk about changing the phone usage, I've heard over and over again that many of the issues that we're seeing in adolescent child psychology seems to stem around the usage of smartphones and social media and stuff. I guess, can you confirm that? Yeah.
Trevor, I think that those are really good call outs. So there are, I think thematically, kind of a handful of pieces that we do see kind of annually or as part of our pictures with kiddos. So I think one of the things that I'm always mindful of, specifically with Newburgh, but so Newburgh is a community that has been touched by suicide. We had 6 kids die by suicide 8 years ago. That started off our work. And so we know that individuals and communities that have been impacted by suicide in and of themselves continue to be higher risk, which I think is why there is such incredible meaning in the work that we're doing. And the more that we can speak to that, have conversations, destigmatize, and really open up access to resources, that can be incredibly powerful for our communities. It's essential that kids know that they have safe spaces that they can go with adults who can care, where they can talk about these really difficult things. So I think the more that we can work at creating these spaces and creating the relationships, that in and of itself can be wildly powerful and protective for our kids and our youth. So I think our community risk factors are something that I think are important for us to be mindful of. Other kind of thematic pieces, and you touched on this a little bit, that I do think that there's really good value in how do we have conversations and open dialogues around what does healthy social media use look like. I am not like an all or nothing person. If anybody who knows me, I live my life like 80%. That we can't say like all social media is bad and tell kids that they can never be on social media again. Like that's gonna be the opposite of the outcome that we want. But how do we, I talk a lot with my kids around like, how do we balance our social media diet? That if we are consuming social media, we want to make sure that we are thinking about what is a healthy amount of time for me to be scrolling? What are the healthy things for me to be looking at? If I, as a 12-year-old female identified person, am just scrolling through image after image after image of supermodels, that might not be the most helpful thing for my body image. And so how do I balance out with mental health related content that's uplifting and positive, with outdoor information, with clubs or activities that I'm interested in, and make sure that I have like a wide balance, but then also turning that off, giving myself space and doing other meaningful ways of connecting as well. I do think that we want to be mindful kind of in this like all or nothing space, that for some of our kiddos, maybe some of our neurodiverse kids, maybe some of our kids that don't feel socially connected well, they do have really meaningful social connections that happen through internet spaces. And so how do we help them identify which ones are really healthy, which ones are helpful? And again, making sure that we have really good balance. Bullying year after year after year is the most significant risk factor that I am working with kids about. We have significant aspects of bullying that come up. That above and beyond continues to be the most significant theme that I see year after year. Does that help to answer? Those are my off the top of my head. I could probably talk up here all day.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, that was good. I guess, and I didn't, if I insinuated that we weren't being proactive about things, that was not my intent. I was really going back to identifying, best practices and, providing tools or, tools, not just to the people that are at risk or having and need help in that realm, but I guess as a population as a whole, to parents and age specific tools and compelling reasons via studies that have been done, really to kind of push those out to parents that may help them mitigate or prevent down the road issues that would need your help.
Thank you.
I really appreciate the question. I think it's such a good, like, how do we instill skills and tools as early as possible to help from a preventative health framework is an incredible opportunity with our kids.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so I am next up on the agenda just to briefly talk about our interim superintendent hiring update. I'm just going to have a brief conversation because we have some action items. So the Personnel Committee met on September 4th, and that makes the three of us, Director Wolfer, Director Woodward, and I. And we met to discuss the really wonderful community input that we got. We had 55 people respond to the survey that went out, a very broad identification of qualities and qualifications. And I thought they were really, grow in with a growth mindset of what do we want to look for moving forward. And we will be working, we had a draft timeline and we'll continue to talk about that later, but just, I think it was a very good first step, and the help with COSA and our district council, Christine Nesbitt, we're going to be moving right along on that. So that's just my brief little update. In case anybody had any questions, we can also talk about it later. Oh, and then I did have the agenda. Dr. Radish put the agenda that we had used in there as well. Okay, Gay Allen, you want to talk about class size and enrollment updates?
Well, good evening. We've had actually 5 days of school now, and our schools have been doing warm body counts, butts and seats, kids that are actually there, not just our synergy count. And we've had more days of elementary school reporting than we've been able to get from the middle and the high school. So middle and high school are really just basically 2 days of figures that we've got. So it's preliminary, but it's looking pretty good. So our regular enrollment for the state school fund for 24-25 school year was projected at 3,896. So that's not our ADMW, but our ADMR. So regular kids in the classroom. However, we're going to be using extended ADMR, extended ADMW, which is really the ADMR from this last year, because you go with the higher of the 2 years that you're in. And so that's what we need to compare our current enrollment to see if we're really up or down for state school fund calculations. So that count was 3,995. Our current ADMR is 4,004. So, or 4,004.5. So we're up by about 9 students. So that's over the entire district. So that's all of our schools and our programs, which is great. It means we haven't lost students, and we thought we were going to.
I'm sorry, can you clarify what's the difference
Sure.
between the 3896 and 3985? Because that's like almost 100. So it was that.
Right. So when we projected for this current school year, we said that we thought we would have 3,896 regular students.
Okay.
Our student count for the end of last year for the ADMR for the whole year was 3,095. 3,995, sorry. And change. I'm leaving the bits and pieces off of that.
Sure, that's fine.
So that's really what the state says. If you're in a state of declining enrollment, you go with the higher of your current year or the year before. So for us, if we stayed at the 4,004 number, which is where we are right now, we would use that number. The state would say, oh, you actually came in higher than the year before, so you use the higher of the 2 years. What I will say is that number never stays. This is our September, October tend to be our highest counts. We may have fluctuation at schools, but by the spring, we've got seniors who are leaving. We have other things. So our enrollment does decline after a certain peak, and the peak is the fall. So I would say we probably won't be funded on the 4,004, but probably the 3,995, which was a solid number from last year. So we can't really count on extra funding, but it means that we're not in a declining enrollment phase right now, which is good. We're holding our own. Right?
Thank you.
So that's how enrollment is looking overall. How it kind of comes down by
by school is a little bit different, or by grade levels. So elementary is a little bit down. Overall, they're about 19 down from what I was thinking they would be. Middle and high school are up a little bit, so they're kind of carrying some of the down of the other, but it's stable right now. As we look at class size across the district, I've got some updates on that. So the average class size for kindergarten currently, and mind you, it's 5 days in, is 21. So that's pretty good, even with reduced staffing. However, we do have one class at 29 and another at 30, and both of those are at the same school. So we're watching those to see, right, if that's going to stay that way for the next little bit, and is there a way we can help at that in those grades? First grade average class size is 22.44. And first, second grade blends have an average class size of 22.4. So they're both right at the same level for first and second grade. And no big bubbly classes anywhere. Second grade average class size is 22.3. Third grade is 22.5. Fourth grade is 24.4, but we do have one class at 32 and a couple in the high 20s, so 28, 29. Fourth grade blends average class size is 24.6. And fifth grade average class size is 24.64, with one class at 29, one currently at 31, and one at 32. In fifth grade, it's not as big a deal as when we have bigger classes at the younger grades. What I don't have yet is any real information on class sizes, section class sizes at either the middle schools or the high school. So those are things that we'll be looking at in the next couple weeks. Again, we don't have a lot of extra staffing to hand out unless we have more students. So there may be some movement if we need to, but that's where we're sitting right now. But the big thing I want you to take away is we didn't lose students. That's really a big positive.
Yeah, yes, that is very positive. Are you done providing your update?
Yes.
That sounds like a pause. Okay. I have a question, and I don't know, I think it's maybe more towards Dr. Radich or just maybe if Tammy was still around, but I know she left. And I still have a student. She's a senior. And of course, I also have a niece and nephew, middle school and high school. So I hear information. I'm concerned with some classes. I hear there's an art class that's got 40+ kids. I hear that a couple of them, I know high school can maybe be in the upper 30s, but some are in the 30 range, and that's fine. But I think some of these specialty classes, like, they don't have enough seats for everybody, and I don't know. And they're banking on the fact that as long as they have 1 or 2 kids absent every day, then there's enough seats. But then I'm just concerned. I know we're going to have higher classes. I'm not trying to say we need to get more teachers. It's more like, can we make sure when we are focusing on these high, outside of the kind of the baseline values, is it make sure we also have adequate space? Is there, maybe do they switch classrooms? I don't know. Some of this may be limited because of constraints. Maybe it's a science class that's really high, and there's, we have a new science wing. You can't really change them because that classroom is built that way, right? And so I don't know, just things I've heard. Wanted to make sure, I don't know, to express those concerns, I guess, at this point.
Just a comment, Director Hayden. I think I appreciate your raising those issues. I was a high school principal for 12 years. This is very normal, particularly at the beginning of the year. And when you do an exercise called balancing, which is not as easy as it sounds, because we have students, and probably here as well, who have very unique needs and very unique schedules. So sometimes they may be in a class of 40, but you can't move them because they have some other very specific classes that they want. So the high school's been at it, as for a few days. we will be talking about high school and middle school. There are some bubbles there that we need to look at, and we need to figure out what are the options. I don't believe we can add any more staffing, but I echo your concern. We have to have space for people in rooms, and there has to be, adequate opportunity for everybody to learn in those classrooms. So part of this, once the high school kind of settles in and we get another count, we do need to get these section counts. Sometimes teachers have rosters where it looks like they have, let's say, 45 students, and the reality is maybe they have 38. And the reason for that is sometimes those students have been registered but didn't show. So there's a process we'll be getting to for these 10-day drops and so forth. I will tell you that I've been extremely pleased with our administrators and our staff at our schools. They have very actively contacted families to see if a child has not shown up, regardless of the grade level. They've been trying to do checks to see if they're coming to school, which is, I think, a really positive sign, that personal connection. But also we need to know who's really going to be there, because we're not going to make a lot of changes just based on somebody's roster. They have to be real people in real chairs. And I suspect what you're hearing is probably real people. I mean, I'm sure they're probably counting themselves, but there is a balancing process that the high schools use. I would assume they have already begun that process. It is difficult because once a student locks into a class, it's tough to get them to move. It's just really hard. They just get really locked in. But we'll work on it and hopefully have an update for you at the next meeting. We'll give you more of the information on the secondary. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Are there any further questions for Galen regarding enrollment numbers? Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. Okay, Director Hayden, would you like to talk about the Finance Advisory Committee?
Yeah, we have something on the docket for this Thursday. It has been announced. It's on the websites for meetings that are coming up. We had 11 candidates. We have a top 6 that are basically kind of voted on to say, hey, everybody had their own selection. I'd say their top 5, and there was an easy top 6, so they're coming in. At that point, hopefully, we will be able to appoint them right after the interviews, and then talk about going forward what our meetings will look like. Because I think we need their inputs on what those will look like going forward. I think we have, yes, our what do I want to say? We have our thoughts of like, hey, we need, for the first few months, we need once a month, but after that, then go forward. But then we need to make sure that, okay, can everybody make a Wednesday or, we have to account for all that. So we need to have a discussion once those have been appointed. The only one thing that's kind of thrown a hiccup, and I'm going to get talk to Director Allen after this, is we have one candidate that is coach's son's sport every day and is not going to be able to make it. So I'm trying to see how we can accommodate maybe a one-off interview still could be announced and still be recorded so everybody can see that, but then try to get that done before Thursday. So we'll see what we can do, but that's as a hiccup. So if that can't be done before Thursday meeting, then the Thursday second half of the agenda may sway a little bit as we need to make sure we give that candidate an opportunity to interview. So that's where we're at.
Well, again, I'm just so impressed by how many people have applied for that position and very appreciative. And that maybe for the people that don't get selected, you could say, check out WESD is looking to recruit people for their finance committee, which also does include Yamhill County. So that might be a next, great step for them to. Thank you for doing that. Appreciate it. Okay, Director Wolfer, you have, well, the agenda says me, it's actually Director Wolfer that is going to be taking these next 2.
Thank you. I'm just going to give a brief summary. The board and public has the large resolutions and background information. First complaint, we received 2 of them. One both under KL. One was regarding a conversation that occurred a few months ago regarding Dr. Phillips' leave and a potential, if there was or was not someone slated to take its place under policy CI. After review, essentially, what it comes down to is that, well, one, I know in my line of work, lots of times conversations are remembered differently. So that doesn't mean that anyone is calling into question the character of another one. Just at this point, two people remember the conversation differently. Two, even if that conversation had happened according to the complainant, it would be essentially a moot point. Policy CI would not actually be applicable here. So policy CI is actually two parts. Paragraph 1, which is what this complainant and previous complainants have talked about, would be what it talks about. The superintendent would appoint someone in their absence. That's for short-term absences, like, hey, I'm going to be at a conference, I'm going to be on vacation, things like that. Paragraph 2 is what is in place here. When the superintendent is unavailable for a long period of time, it says due to disability or any other reason, long period of time, it is the board's imperative and legal responsibility to assign those. So even had this conversation happened according to the complainant, policy CI, you would not have been violated. So according to that one, you can read the resolution. It'll be resolution 2025-08. I will be during the action items recommending that the board adopt that, and we can have discussion around that. But that will be my recommendation. The second complaint from Ms. Wallace was regarding an executive session and noticing. And again, there is a longer background on that. And where that was properly noticed, and we do have the right as a board to change the agenda. There was a last minute need to add an agenda item, and that doesn't require the change. We had properly noticed that there was going to be an executive session. So I will be asking the board to adopt resolution 2025-09 during that time.
Yeah, and there's one portion of that complaint that's super frustrating to me, and I'm just going to read it. And this is from the complainant. I am yet again disappointed that this board works so hard to be non-transparent in its workings. And that is, I think, a very frustrating sentiment from this individual, given the extraordinary amount of work that we have been trying to do to be transparent. It is, I believe, a value that each one of our board members holds very strongly. So it's just a comment I have about that. Any other comments or concerns before we move on to the next item?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the discussion that had happened. I was a little worried about the optics when I saw the complaint. I went back and I watched the meeting, and yeah, I didn't see anything that would have characterized any use of putting down this employee at all. I think that it was a conversation about a difference of remembering. Yeah, I guess it's a messy situation, but from my perspective and what I saw, I can't reconcile what's there compared to what's on video.
Okay, so then,
Hold on.
oh, sorry.
Is this where we have time to talk about this, or should be more in the resolution time, or where we have more open discussion about this matter?
This is listed as a discussion item, so we can discuss it, and that can also be done during the discussion of the specific action.
Okay.
That was just the end of my presentation.
Oh, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure we aren't getting too off topic of the, agenda. Again, it's clearly stated by two board members. At this point, it's maybe a difference of remembrance of the conversation or whatever. I also watched that video. I looked for any documentation that we may have received as board of directors. In my line of work, and I think a lot of lines of work, if there's a change that happens and there is something that there's a change in leadership, short-term or long-term, that is clearly communicated in a letter, an email to everybody in the district, to whatever. That was never shared. That was never done. The email that the deputy superintendent read, for the superintendent on that budget meeting night, on the first night of that absence, did not disclose anything on there. So to me, just from the lack of, I don't know how to say this right. Probably, again, the normal practice in the universe of business and running, large districts, corporations, whatever you want to call them. There was nothing that I would say that would dictate that there was a clear intent to change ownership of our leadership, I guess. And again, I know this is, I don't know. Again, I'm going to end it at that point. It's just, I don't see, I think it is two different people remembering the differences differently, what happened. But again, there's nothing else that would have told me one person, the other is in the truth or is lying about this. So.
And if I could just piggyback on that, because I think that's another feeling that I have on this, it was confusing to me that it didn't come up to me at once until I believe this meeting that there was any thought that that power had been delegated. It seems confusing that that conversation wouldn't have come up by someone, whether it was Mr. Lindenberger or anyone else in that meeting, that this had happened. And then all of a sudden, months later, as we're in this, that's when this had come up. So I've been confused by this since that previous meeting. And I just don't see the situation where this has happened in the order that it would have taken this long to say something if that had been the case.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, like, I just want to reiterate too, that even if all that had, which sound, yeah, even if all that had, it wouldn't really matter, because, it's like any public body, you wouldn't have the city manager going out on an extended period of time would not get to dictate to the city council who their replacement was going to be for the next 6 months. That's just not how it works in any world. So for people, that's the other part of the complaint, was not just about the alleged smear against this person's character that was addressed, but also this complaint did allege that we violated policy CI, and I do not believe that we did, based on the analysis and looking at the policy. So we retain that legal right, and we acted appropriately in exercising that by finding a emergency replacement.
Okay, we're finished with that discussion. Then I would like to invite Casey Cunningham up to come talk to us about the Cooperative Improvement Agreement, the Green Seam Trail. Okay. Little button.
Thank you, Director. So this is, I more formally, it's part of Dundee Elementary School, our new school, and the timing of this is critical. I think that you're like, why are you coming to me after school opened? Well, the reason is because this is for public agencies, the City of Dundee, Department of Transportation, 12th, Chehalis Parks and Recreation, and then obviously the school district have to enter into an agreement on a required green seam trail. Paul and I like to call it the path to nowhere, but essentially there is a long development requirement in that new the area adjacent to the bypass, that any development that's adjacent to the bypass will have a path that eventually will be connected. And this one will, I think, at some point be connected. Anyway, is it 10 years, is it 20 years? I don't know the answer to that, but at some point it will be connected and will actually connect to real paths and actually have some value. But as it stands right now, it's basically our property to our property is the only connection. But what we're really talking about and what we're giving signing authority to Dr. Radich on is the maintenance is going to be Chehalis Parks and Recreation solely. We are funding the construction as a requirement of the development only. And so that is the $113,559.60. And I will add that because of the timing of this, there will be an additional mobilization charge from our earthwork contractor because we were not able to get the agreement done during the course of construction, unfortunately. But it'll be in the range of about 8,000 to 10,000. So it's not significant. It's not small. But it's not a budget breaker by any means. But this just took time. There was a number of iterations that came. The original draft comes from ODOT. CPRD wanted, because they're taking on the maintenance, took some time to review it, had some comments that went back and forth with us. We had to meet with the city of Dundee to make sure that in the case that CPRD couldn't ceases to exist, for lack of better words, there was a major earthquake that damaged it and they didn't have the funding to repair it, then who would take that over? And so the language basically states that a public agency will take it over. It doesn't recognize City of Dundee as that, but it was not ever come back to us. And so that was critical for us to make sure that that language was exclusive to it. We were turning over the responsibility to other agencies besides ourselves. So just for real quick, the recommendation is that we are signing this, the maintenance to CPRD, even though we are funding the construction of it.
Quick question, was this previously like already slated? And I know you've presented several different times, like this was kind of already bucketed. Was that already there? Or is this just kind of, oh yeah, we need now to do it. Now it's now coming from whatever the last time we said we had this amount.
No, this is currently in the, it was on the bid day drawing.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's already contracted, everything less the additional mobilization fee, which would be an added cost to the
Okay.
project. But this is already baked in. This was a condition of development. So like during design,
Gotcha.
I mean, none of you were here at the time when we probably talked about this in the beginning of the time.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess I just hoping to clarify, you said that extra 10,000 for the late contract, Dad, that is taken care of in the funds.
We have the funding to cover it within our contingencies that are still within the Dundee project budget, but it's not in the 113.
And this is on land that is ODOT land?
Correct, through the easement. I mean, basically the end of our property along where the green seam is ODOT, not easement, that's not the right, is that the right word? Yeah, it would be an easement. Yes,
Yeah.
it's an easement, right of way. It's a right of way. That's the best way of putting it. It's the right of way. So it's ODOT property because of the right of way language that's there. It was part of our original purchase, land purchase.
And then just to clarify for any families that may be concerned, there is ample fencing between school property and this path.
Yeah, so if you, on the diagram, you can kind of see that there's like a dashed
got it.
line
Yep.
that's on the entire perimeter. That is the security perimeter fencing that is, it keeps anyone who's on that trail from obviously easily entering our site. And that fencing goes around the radius area and then it goes along the edge of our perimeter, kind of in the squared area out there.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Cunningham?
I don't have questions for Mr. Cunningham. Appreciate the update on this. I do want to make sure, once it's complete, I guess I have concerns. Yes, we have a fence, but I would like to know either the Newburgh Dundee Police and or CPRD, how they're going to try to keep it safe around there. Oregon has not had the best reputation from transients and those such, and I just want to make sure that all of a sudden now we have, hey, they've got some concrete, and I don't want like all of a sudden become a transient camp around there, right? And again, this is not stopping this. It's just I'm just voicing the concern of going forward, of like making sure that how are we going to manage this space going forward? So
I will add, I guess, I mean, this is just during that planning session, we did speak to that concern. I mean, it's adjacent to an overpass. I mean, we did iterate that it was critical that once this is constructed, there would have to be some kind of level of constant, checking on, but it will need to be reiterated at some point in time to the Dundee police, because they won't remember that it's there. It's kind of out of sight as it is now, because the school blocks basically the entire visibility of it.
thank you.
Can we entertain a motion?
I move that the Newburgh School District 29J Board of Directors approve the cooperative agreement Green Seam Trail, Oregon 18, Newburgh Dundee bypass section as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? We'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Hey,
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. And then, but before you leave, maybe when are we gonna hear back from you about our money that our contingency money for not the bypass, the building, the bond?
Yeah, Paul and I met this morning, had a very good discussion on, where we're at. Jeremy and Trevor and I met with the new our operations director, manager, and also the outgoing project manager, Larry Hampton. Really good discussion about prioritizing and kind of laying out where that money comes in. We have one critical project that's already designed and will go out to bid here before December. That's kind of a critical point for us about how much for that money can go. But right now it's a prioritization phase, which I think we could probably bring next month. If not, then the month after.
Yes, the projects that we looked at today, and it's not as lengthy a list as I think the board might anticipate, and it's not a glamorous list.
Yeah.
We're talking roofs, we're talking ceiling and painting, and we're talking HVAC. That's about as exciting as it gets. But if we don't take care of these things, including this building, the roof's going to cave in on us. The water's already been intruding quite a bit. So why some of these projects were not in the initial bond is beyond me. I'll just stop there. I'm just puzzled. And there are some glamour projects that I know that well, I shouldn't call them glamour. I think they're great. But if you look at the difference between safety and security and preservation of the facility, the recommendation to the board is going to be to go to that route. Obviously, the board can overturn anything we recommend, but the only other process that Casey and I discussed this morning is I would like to see the list from every single site in the district to be sure we haven't missed something. If we missed it the first time, we probably missed it again. And the people the most knowledgeable people in those schools are the custodians. And I've had a chance, as I visited schools this week, to talk to a number of them. They will know what's right and what needs assistance. But the other part is legal. We need to make sure that any of these projects fit within the bond title. And Galen and I have been looking at that and trying to determine to make absolutely sure that we don't get ourselves in a situation where we like the project, but under the bond title, we're not eligible to spend those funds on those projects. It would appear from the non-glamorous list that I shared with you that those are probably okay, but we're going to double and triple check just to be absolutely sure.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time tonight.
Yep, thank you guys.
Okay, moving on to, we have two very similar items, but we'll take them one at a time. The boys and girls water polo for out-of-state travel request. They would like to attend the Western States Girls Water Polo Tournament in Modesto, California. And the boys also would like to go to Modesto. It looks like different times, but in October. So the trip would be financed by a combination of player and family contributions, Booster Club grants, and the ASB Water Polo fundraising account. So I need, we're gonna do them. No, we can do them all at once. Okay. Any motion?
I move that the Newburgh School District Board of Directors approve out-of-state travel for the Newburgh High School Girls Water Polo Team to Modesto, California, October 10th to October 12th, 2024.
Second?
Okay, and move that the Newburgh School District Board of Directors approve out-of-state travel for the Newburgh High School Boys Water Polo Team to Modesto, California, October 17th to October 19th, 2024.
Second.
Any discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor? Sorry.
Aye.
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 Okay. Motion passed unanimously. We'll be looking to hear maybe an update on how they did. Okay, Dr. Radich, would you like to talk about the Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook, please?
Yes. When I came here, I neglected to check to see if our handbooks are up to date and discovered probably a few days before school started that they had not been revised for the current school year. So I spent a weekend working on a couple of them, and I can't say that I've made significant revisions. So what I'm presenting to the board this evening seems a little odd, but there are only really 3 pages that have been changed on the Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook. One is the cover. The other one is an introduction, which is brand new. The message to our students, and then an introduction talking about the importance of attendance and safety and working together. And then the third is just basically an update on the school contact information, which normally appears in these handbooks. The remainder of the handbook was approved by the Board of Directors a couple of years ago. So at this point, I'm asking the board to approve at least these addenda to the handbook, with the understanding, and you can certainly approve, I sent you the PDF of the entire handbook. So unless you have a concern, I would ask you to maybe just to accept the whole handbook for the 24-25 school year, or just these addenda. Another comment, we need to spend some time talking about what do parents and students and staff really need. Some of these are rather onerous publications, very dense. If I were a student, I probably wouldn't read through some of these, over 100 some pages. It's important to codify things, but I think we've got to really talk through with our students and staff, what's a better way to transmit some of this information. It's important, but I think there are districts who've done a remarkable job, and I think there are exemplars out there. But given the short time frame we've had to get something on the books for this year, this is the best I could do, at least with a few days' notice.
Just curious, have you guys read the student handbook? Rights and Responsibilities Handbook?
I don't think I've ever once read the student handbook. I am not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever once read it.
My only experience with the handbook, I've never read it. My one experience was a few years back when I worked with a committee of people from the board to revise the handbook, and I gave some input on that committee, but I don't think I ever read through the full thing myself. No, I think it was really, I heard about whatever we were discussing, and I gave my input on whatever item we were discussing, but I never read it, and I have not. Yep. Nonsense.
And
Sorry,
ahead.
no, I appreciate the input. I will say, just because I've had more recent grads come through, I will say that pre-COVID, it was a requirement that they would at least read this and or the NHS handbook of student rights. I don't know if there's a different version, but I knew that like they literally the first week they would take, like every class would take 10, 20 pages. They would do it. I mean, that's literally the first 2 days of school is going through the handbook. Then post-COVID, it has not been a requirement. So again, it could be a pre-COVID to post-COVID thing, that why people or the kids don't know about this as much, or it's not pushed so much, but just to give that context for people to know. So
One of the complicating factors is evidently the district made a decision a year or so ago to combine the employee handbook with the student handbook. And it's just really very confusing. And a lot of the areas that say it's for students, really, they're not. So I've talked to some staff here at the office, and there's actually people excited about beginning this project. And I would say if we're going to do a quality job, we probably do need to get a group together this fall. But I really think our students could be significantly instrumental in doing this. And there's probably an electronic system with something that would really get students' attention than this really dense epistle. These things are important, and they're a reflection of board policy, so I don't want to minimize that. But there's got to be a better way to do this work.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I think what
I
we
have
need
a,
to do.
sorry,
Oh, go ahead.
just a clarification. So I understand that right now online we have the employee and student combined. And then tonight we are approving the rights and responsibility. Are we maintaining the employee student combined?
Yes, that,
Until further notice?
that's already gone out and that, we didn't really change that. And it doesn't typically need the board's approval.
Yeah.
This one does, the student rights and responsibilities, because it's a lot of board policies included in it.
Thank you.
And it has some really good information. It's just difficult.
Yeah.
Probably not your book club reading material.
Well, and that'll be very mindful for the policy committee as they do their work this year. Not to call out any other parents on the board, but have you read these handbooks and policies?
I did some research into it a few weeks ago when we started talking about cell phones. And I kind of stopped when I got to the employee student combination. So as a parent, as an educator, and then thinking about my 10-year-old the combination of that is very confusing to me.
Well, it's really good to hear that because, we're putting this out to all the families and, wanting to have a good way of disseminating information that's meaningful. So appreciate that.
I would like to, once we get it going in a perfect world, when we have all these documents, I think, and you kind of mentioned this, but putting it in age appropriate language in a short, like a poster for elementary school, a couple things for, middle, to have quick things that are easy for students to reference back to, I think would actually make it an impactful system and not just some huge document on the school district website. And student input on that will be vital.
Okay, would anybody like to make a motion?
I move that the Newburgh School District Board of Directors approve the 2024-2025 Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call for Trevor, did you have something?
No, I was just getting ready to vote.
Okay, just getting ready for the vote. Okay, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passed. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'd like to talk about our next item is our committee appointments. We have Dr. Radich really did me a solid by putting this together because I just was scribbling notes on a piece of paper today. So thank you so much for making this look super professional. So we have 4 committees currently. We have the Facilities Committee, Personnel, Finance Advisory Committee, and the Policy Advisory Committee. The current Facilities Committee is comprised of Director Hayden and Director DeHart. Personnel is Director Woodward, Director Wolfer, and myself. And then the Finance Advisory Committee is Director Hayden and Director Allen. And the Policy Advisory Committee is Director DeHart, Director Allen, and Director Wolfer. And I know that Director Wolfer would like to get off the Policy Committee because he has a lot on his plate. And I believe Director Woodward wants to get on the Policy Committee. But other than that, I don't know where people are interested in going or staying on committees. We need to incorporate Director Nichols into committee work. I would ask that we don't make big changes to the Personnel Committee until we're finished with this next month's work. It's complicated enough, but then we move forward. I guess also of note is I think I had an understanding that if there were 3 people on the committee, that is not a quorum of the board, but that does not seem to be actually accurate. And so when we have committees, it still requires a quorum. It still needs posting of the meeting notices, having it on Zoom. And, Director Hayden and I have been, finding this out as we've been trying to get our Personnel Committee and Finance Committee together. So it's just, I think it doesn't matter how many people we have on the committees.
I think it's not that it's a quorum of the board, but
It's a quorum of the committee.
Yes, and it still just requires
Yeah.
public notice and
Yeah.
all of that, but you still would want the committees to be less than a quorum of the board.
Yes.
So
But could you have 4 people on a committee? So what if 4 people wanted to be on a policy committee? Is that a? I'm putting our council on.
That is not normally done.
Okay, so
I mean,
sticking with the
quorum
3
of the board is a quorum of the board, and that'll be a public meeting of
Okay.
the board as
Yeah. Okay. So I guess what we need to talk about is, where do people want to be? What committees do people want to be on? Do you
I
want
was
to?
just gonna say, like, yeah, I will echo what you said. I would like to come off policy since I'm on personnel and doing vice chair things. And then I would like to stay on personnel for now and then revisit that topic after this month's work, because I could easily see myself wanting off that one too after this. So
Okay. So then that would mean, so let me just ask that, maybe this is, Director Allen, do you want to stay on the policy committee?
I would like to do that, yes.
Director DeHart, do you want to stay on the policy committee?
Yes.
Okay. And then is there anybody else that would like to be on the policy committee?
I would love to serve on the policy committee.
Okay, so then we've got the policy.
I'll remove myself so she can.
Okay. So then we have the policy committee set, and the finance advisory committee is just, we just recently set that, so I don't think we need changes. We don't want to do any changes currently to the personnel committee, but we could revisit that in November, maybe.
Jumping back to the finance committee, finance advisory committee. I think we really took that from what the budget chair and vice chair were suggesting. I don't think there's an issue if there wanted to be a third board member on there, and I don't think it's too late to invite them or to have them start to be included, because we're still even in the interview process of that committee. Yeah, I'm just saying, if somebody's really wanting to be another one and this is their interest, they are certainly welcome to join. So.
Well, and also they can watch and participate, that way. Okay. Any further discussion about committee assignments?
Yeah, just a comment. Based on the situation I think that you've been having with personnel committee, we've had with the finance committee, that we didn't have with the policy committee was, and maybe an issue going forward with the policy committee as current district office staff is, we couldn't, as the policy committee, go onto OSBA's website and gather the policies that they're suggesting and figure out which ones were best for us and setting up the meetings. So I don't know if that's the world we're going to live in for a while with the committees, is dealing with those administrative tasks associated with it. I think it's something to talk about, figure out what that looks like, because running into these, we don't want to cause an issue that we're, breaking a public meetings law because we didn't know or we didn't have that scheduled. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on what that looks like, or I don't want to overwhelm the time of the staff is already working hard. So
The district, we would go ahead and do the postings as we did with the finance and the personnel committee. We'd follow the same pattern. I think what we need from the leadership of those committees is basically just what your agenda is. And it's pretty basic, and we can send you a template that we can use. And I think as long as Claudia and I are here, we can do that. I can't promise beyond what the two of us would be willing to do. Relative to policy, I think we do need a staff member to assist. There's a lot of work with policy, as you well know. So it may not be an administrator, or it may be. I would need to think about it. Maybe I can talk to Chair Bridges and we can come up with a solution for how that might work for this year, since we're pretty shorthanded.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because I remember hearing about that getting onto OSBA website to get some of that documentation. Maybe there's just a workaround with that.
And then my other thought was, and I know we ended up getting a bit of a schedule. If there's any way to have a more open look at different rooms that are available further out so that we could plan accordingly with schedules rather than trying to get in last minute.
Our receptionist, Erica, can help you with that. And I think what I could ask her to do is maybe put something together that gives you the get a calendar out to you so you can see what's available.
Like if there's like a Google Calendar that we could.
Yeah, we could
I
ask
don't
her
know
if she
that's
would do
possible.
something like that you could access. It would be better for you to be able to just physically view it rather than having to call in all the time to check. So I'll talk with her about some way to do that.
Thank you.
Well, it doesn't look like, do we have to vote on this? Because it says board action item. I guess the board chair appoints. So you are all appointed to your committees. Go forth and do good work. I know policy is going to be very busy this year. I think we have some things that we need to, work on. So, but I appreciate everybody's willingness to step up and be on at least one committee. Okay, Director Wolford, do you want to take the next two?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I'm gonna start with the first complaint from Tabitha Rennie. And I'm not gonna read through all of that. It's in the packet. And but I just want to bring up to the end here. I think that last paragraph is I'll just kind of summarize it. The board meeting was held more than 2 months after Dr. Phillips took leave, after the alleged conversation on June 10th took place. In response to this complaint, Director Woodward stated she does not recall being informed by Dr. Phillips that Mr. Lindenberger was to be appointed as interim superintendent, and that she has a different memory of the conversation that took place on June 10th. She does not wish to create disharmony, but cannot recant a statement because it accurately reflects her memory of the conversation. And like I said earlier, with the policy CI was not violated. So my recommendation is that the board adopt the resolution the resolution 2025-08 by name only. And so I'm going to make a motion and then go from there. So I move that the Newburgh School District Board of Directors adopt resolution 2025-08, Newburgh School District 29 Board of Directors concerning KL complaint August 28, 2024 by title only.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Can you give us 30 seconds to kind of skim through this more?
Absolutely. It's if you need longer than 30 seconds, it's kind of long. So
I'm curious, counsel, if you, because I don't disagree with any of this. The one thing that I am interested in at this moment is policy CL, because I don't necessarily read it as two separate things. I see it as two separate situations, not that either of them has changed this situation, but is that policy saying that it would just seem that if there was a medical leave and beforehand it was, I do want this person, that would be fine. I don't see that as what has happened at this point, but I'm curious about that.
The board would have no obligation to honor that
Okay,
at all.
thank you.
Let me clarify. What I mean by that is the board has an absolute right to appoint the emergency superintendent of its choice that is well established And your policy does not deprive the board of that fundamental right.
Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that.
I would just like to say that I'm heartened to hear that many of us on our own time did go back and rewatch the meeting. I did that when we first got this complaint. And I think it just speaks to our efforts to be as truthful and transparent as we can be. And I'm just glad to hear that many of us did that as a thorough follow-up to this.
Does policy CL give timeframes?
It's policy CI, and from my from my understanding, no, it's just more of talking about two separate situations. And again, and it wouldn't be something that we would even have to honor, but where my understanding would be that in the first situation on a temporary leave, you know, or like, hey, I'm going to be gone for the weekend, or I'm going to be gone for this board meeting, so and so is going to stand in my place, is what the first paragraph is referring to, or at a training or this or that, just for a temporary, I need someone to stand in for me for the day, but any long-term absence would be our prerogative at any time. And that's
So
what
I
paragraph 2.
Called up policy CI. It states when the superintendent is to be absent from the district, an administrator shall be designated by the superintendent to serve in their absence. A superintendent shall inform the board chair. If the superintendent is unavailable to serve because they are disabled or for some other reason, the board shall assign the superintendent's duties as appropriate. It seems to me that the second paragraph really revolves around the superintendent being incapacitated. I don't see there that it differentiate or gives specific timeframes by which, you know, it's a month or 2 months. And did we know when we passed this the first time how long the administrator was going to be out for?
I'm going to ask our legal counsel to answer that question.
The second paragraph of policy CI does not relate just to the situation in which someone is unavailable to serve because of a disability. It also relates to the situation in which someone is unavailable to serve or perform their duties for some other reason. When someone takes medical leave for 2 months, they are unavailable to serve. That's fairly well established. In answer to your other question, I believe that's a question for the board. I think you were aware that the length of leave would be 2 months at the time that you made the appointment, if that's what you
I
were.
believe so, yes.
Yeah.
And so for the scenario, I mean, it doesn't give timeframes. I hear you. So I guess I'm confused. We keep referring to paragraph 2, but I don't know why we would go to paragraph 2.
Well, if I could have a conversation with you, I'm in that moment when this all happened and we were informed that we needed to act swiftly because we were without a superintendent in that moment and it was critical to have that position filled. There wasn't time to go back and check, and there were other people in that room who it seems like would have said something if that was the case, but it sounds like even beyond that, CI says that we as the board get to decide who our superintendent acting is rather than an extended leave where somebody else is taking over. Do you agree with that, Trevor?
Well, if in situation in paragraph 1 wasn't met, then I agree. You would defer to paragraph 2.
Director DeHart, so if this is Director Wilford, so if you see in the packet the longer portion that was provided by legal counsel talks about paragraph 1 and how that's commonly understood in Oregon law and historically. Paragraph 1, it's not necessarily a time frame, but it's a situation that talks about commonly understood to provide for coverage and continuity for short-term absences such as a vacation or conference. And so that's more when that would be. So, hey, I'm again, like I was trying to give that example earlier, I'm going to a conference, I'm going to be, in the woods unavailable because I'm camping for a week. So this person, is my fill-in. This was a much different situation and why paragraph 2 takes in place. This was, I'm unavailable because under certain laws, we can't contact, they can't do work. So they're unavailable and an extended period of time was why that would fall under paragraph 2.
I'm going to weigh in here, and I'd like to read a paragraph prepared by legal counsel. In closing, I will remind each member of the board of their fiduciary duty to act in the district's best interests at all times. Board members in need of legal opinion about the employment of the superintendent are to direct their request to the board chair. As board members are aware, Dr. Phillips has an ongoing legal conflict with the board concerning his employment contract, and both he and the board are represented by the legal counsel of their choice. Communications concerning the conflict between Dr. Phillips and the board are to be made exclusively between legal counsel. Failure by board members to honor this boundary may harm the district's interest. At this point, we have a first and a second, and I'm calling for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Okay, and so let's go through the vote.
Aubrey Nichols, aye.
Nancy Woodward, aye.
Deb Bridges, aye.
James Wolfer, aye.
Jeremy Hayden, aye.
Saul Allen, aye.
Director
And nay?
DeHart, nay.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Director Wolfer, would you like to take on the second one?
Yeah. 1 second. So this was the complaint mentioned earlier from Rebecca Wallace regarding a change to the agenda. Again, the recommendations and such are in resolution 2025-09. I'm going to recommend that we adopt that. The big part that the end, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I think what is germane here is that this would be resolving that no violation of ORS 192.610 to 192.705 occurred has been alleged. Essentially, that the board, the last part of that paragraph, the board is not prohibited from amending its agenda even during the meeting, and that includes executive sessions. So this would find that by adopting this resolution, this would find that the public meetings law complaint filed by the complainant Rebecca Wallace on September 4, 2024 is dismissed. And so I move that the Newburgh School District 29J Board of Directors adopt resolution 2025-09. Newburgh School District 29J Board of Directors concerning public meetings complaint of September 4, 2024 by title only.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Director DeHart, do you have a vote?
Yep. Abstain.
Thank you. Well, I guess he abstained. Everybody else voted in favor. Motion carries. Okay, so we are going to moving on to, we need to approve the qualities and qualifications of the interim superintendent search. Thank you. I keep turning it on and off. We are going to approve the qualities and qualifications of the interim superintendent. I'll give some background. On Wednesday, August 21st, Newburgh School District 29J posted notice of a public hearing to elicit community input regarding the qualities and qualifications of the interim superintendent. The community was also invited to give input regarding these qualifications qualifications in writing or via online submission. And we also had a very fabulous a survey that Claudia Stewart sent out. And 55 people responded to that survey. And it was, I felt that the content of the responses was very thoughtful, and the committee, I think we felt that those were really great qualities and qualifications. And so we need to approve the qualities and qualifications for the interim superintendent position as presented.
I move that the Newburgh School District Board of Directors approve the qualities and qualifications for the interim superintendent position as presented.
Second.
Can we have one director that
Oh,
stepped out for
yep.
a minute, so let's.
We'll take
yeah,
a pause.
So discuss it.
As a point of discussion, I just want to thank everybody who was involved in this, and especially thank the community members who took the time to respond to the survey.
And I guess I can take a little time since we, the number one was honesty, integrity. Number two was communication skills. 3, non-political and unifying. 4 is empathy and compassion. 5 is leadership and teamwork. 6, educational and fiscal expertise. And 7, community engagement. The attributes reflected the desire for a superintendent who's both ethically grounded and capable of fostering a positive, inclusive, and effective educational environment. And I don't think we could ask for anything more. We'd be very fortunate. So we have a motion by Nancy Woodward and a second by Jeremy Hayden. Any further discussion? Okay.
We just wanted to give you some.
We
time
wanted to make sure you didn't miss it.
And that if you had to.
Thank you. I heard it all.
Oh, okay. I call for the vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. So then that brings us to the next step, which to approve the interim superintendent posting. We received some initial input and guidance from COSA, and then the personnel committee took that information and merged our qualities and qualifications and just sort of enhanced a little bit of what COSA had prepared. And the following interim superintendent vacancy posting is in our notebook. And if it is approved tonight, which I hope it is, then I will send this off to COSA and they will post it right away. And we'll get the process moving.
I move that the Newburgh School District Board of Directors approve the posting for the interim superintendent position as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry, Trevor, I didn't hear.
Oh, we hadn't got to him. I'm abstaining.
You're abstaining. Okay, thank you. Then motion passes. All in favor?
No, not all.
I mean, sorry, one abstain. Trevor DeHart abstained. Sorry. I was just getting excited because we're moving along. So the next piece is to adopt the regular hiring procedures. And Krista couldn't be here tonight. So we need to, I'm gonna sort of look to our council and get some feedback on that.
Sure. What I believe that COSA prepared is both the job description, and the posting, which you already have approved. And then the procedures are really about the process and the calendar that's followed. So if you look at the attachment on page 121, that's got things. It basically talks about your process, and implicit within that are certain, policy kind of choices. For example, you're going to post it on the COSA website. It looks like, from what I'm reading here, that it's sort of a Northwest centered search, not a national search. So there's some implicit choices within that. And you do need to approve something like this in order to be able to proceed into an executive session to review candidates. And if this isn't it, you would need to approve something that's a modified version at a later point, but I know your timeline's tight.
Okay.
So just to clarify, by approving this, this is saying the procedures are included in an executive session to review candidates.
These are, what you're approving here are the procedures and policy choices. You've already approved the posting, and that's kind of a part of it as well, to be able to go into executive session. So, I would recommend that the board, pass what COSA has presented. I know that it is part of what is necessary for the board to later be able to go into an executive session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to point out, so one of the things we talked about in the personnel committee meeting was that like this hiring calendar can change depending on COSA, the board needs, things like that. Then a couple of things to be of note on there for the rest of the board is by next Tuesday, we're gonna want some submissions from board members, as well as COSA is gonna provide some potential questions. But in the meantime, if you start thinking of questions that you would want to ask candidates, if you could just start thinking, ruminating on that, and we'll ask for those later to be sent to the personnel committee, so that we can distill that down just to some of those for the board to ask, because we want to have standardized questions. So just start thinking about that now, because we're going to be asking for those at another time.
I move that the Newburgh School District Board of Directors adopt the hiring procedures as recommended by search consultant Krista Parent, Executive Director of the Confederation of Oregon School Administrators.
Second.
Discussion.
Yeah, I have a question. Just to understand the timeline. So I see the closes 9/21 to 22 personnel committee reviews applications. Is it just the personnel committee, or does the whole, like, just from what's been submitted, did the rest of the board members also get the application, or like, when does it transition from like the personnel committee to the rest of the board on our applicants?
So I can answer that. So the charge that the personnel committee was given is to narrow it. So that's going to depend on how many applications we get. If it's only a few, we're going to send the entire ones on the 24th. The entire board would see that for the executive session. If we talked about, if we receive a lot of applications, the personnel committee may have an executive session on the 23rd to try to narrow that to 3, 4, 5 or something like that to present to the board. So we just don't know how many are we going to get. Are we going to get 100? Are we going to get 4? So, but on the 24th is when we would have at least a slate to as per our charge to give to the board to do interviews and executive.
And I talked with Christine a little bit today about that process, and I mean, I'd love to have 20 applicants, but that's probably not the case. But that on the executive session on the 24th, we could have the applications available there for people to review as well. I think it's really important, the confidentiality for these applicants, and just make sure that people wouldn't be sharing their names outside of that. So, but we could build in that time for people to review if they haven't had a chance, because we want you to be able to review them and thoroughly. And I'm not sure what a packet looks like in terms of an application. I know that they won't have letters of recommendation, because that's one of the things COSA said is just give us the names and then give us your a letter and I think your application, your resume. Sorry. So it would be pretty easy to review.
Point of clarification question, on 24th is regular session of the board, but that is including the executive session that sounds like we'll be precluding that.
We'll
Prior
have
to that,
right,
so,
exactly,
yeah.
at 6 o'clock to make sure that people can make that work. Any further questions or Discussion? If not, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Trevor DeHart has abstained. The rest is aye. The motion carries 6-1 in favor. Thank you. So then we're going on to the next, which is that we adopt the hiring standards, criteria, and policy directives as recommended by the search consultant. This seems to be, I'm going to let Christine talk about that.
Okay. Thank you. Really, I think this was a duplicate. You've already adopted the hiring standards, criteria, and policy directives. Those things, as that phrase is interpreted, those things are already embedded within your the calendar sheet that you just adopted, as well as the posting and the Q and Q. So
Sounds like we can remove this from
yes,
our,
you can.
okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
In a spirit of transparency, we like to make sure that we're doing this properly. So moving on to our second to last item. On June, I'm going to read this because this is kind of a little complicated. The 6 of our board members were not members of the board when the actions transpired that resulted in a complaint. Rebecca Pyros was a member of the Newburgh School District Board. On June 28, 2022, a complainant filed a complaint with the Newburgh School Board alleging multiple violations of law. With respect to OAR 581-022-2370, complainant made the following allegations. The school board repeatedly failed to process complaints in accordance with the district's complaint process. The chair of the board, board member 1, and another board member 6, regularly heard anonymous complaints that were not submitted in accordance with the district's complaint process. On November 8, 2021, the school board heard anonymous complaints against the district superintendent that were not submitted in accordance with the district's complaint process and that were not investigated properly. With respect to complainant's allegations that the school board violated ORS 659850 and OAR 581-021-0045 by failing to accommodate board member 5's disability, complainant made the following allegations. The school board did not provide board member 5 with material before the August 10, 2021 school board meeting, thereby failing to accommodate board member 5's disability. On August 24, 2021, before an executive meeting of the school board, board member 6 opened a public meeting for the purpose of voting on whether to secure legal counsel without adhering to public meetings law, effectively failing to accommodate board member 5's disability. The school board did not provide board member 5 with material before the November 9, 2021 school board meeting, thereby failing to accommodate board member 5's disability. Sorry, I think it's important to read this. On April 8, 2022, before the April 12th, 2022 school board meeting, board member 1 added an agenda item to the meeting without providing board member 5 with material related to the agenda item, thereby failing to accommodate board member 5's disability. With respect to complainant's allegations that the school board violated ORS 659850 by including the harassment of a minority race and LGBTQ2SIA+ individuals and failing to prevent or mitigate that harassment, complainant made the following allegation. At the July 12th, 2021 school board meeting, a school board member, board member 7, proposed 3 changes to the meeting's agenda, including proposing a ban on Black Lives Matter and pride flags, proposing to rescind the district's All Students Belong policy, and proposing to rescind the anti-racist resolution that the board adopted on June 2020. The school board did not respond to complainant's June 28th complaint. On September 1st, 2022, the Oregon Department of Education sent notice to complainant and the school board that it was accepting complainant's appeal under OAR 581-002-0051AB. Under that rule, a complainant may file an appeal with the department if 30 days has transpired since the complainant filed a complaint with the school district at any step in a multi-step complaint process, and the complainant has not received a written answer from the district. Preliminary conclusions. In consideration of the evidence before the Oregon Department of Education, the department finds that the Newburgh School Board may have violated ORS 659.850 and OAR 581-021-0045 because the board treated board member 5 in a manner that is quote unquote fair in form but discriminatory in operation. On the basis of disability and because the board limited board member 5's quote enjoyment of any right, privilege, advantage, or opportunity, unquote, in consideration of that disability. Accordingly, the department encourages the parties to reach an agreement through conciliation. Because complainant filed the appeal on behalf of board member 5, the parties for conciliation in this case are the school board and board member 5. However, board member 5 may involve complainant, including allowing complainant to negotiate on their behalf in any way that the board member 5 wants to. ODE provides a deadline of 30 days to parties to enter into a conciliation order, which may be extended by mutual agreement. To develop a conciliation agreement, it will take a bit of drafting of time and exchange of information, so it would be ideal to receive board authorization to negotiate a conciliation agreement subject to board final approval.
So, board, a conciliation agreement is it's a mutually negotiated agreement that contains terms that resolve the issue between the parties. So ODE has basically come out with its preliminary ruling that the then board did discriminate on the basis of disability when it failed to accommodate board member 5, Rebecca Pyros. So an example of terms that could be included in a conciliation agreement are things like the board will give a public acknowledgement of what occurred. That's just one example of something. It could be the board will review its ADA policy to make sure it's currently, up to snuff, legally speaking. The alternative to a final the alternative to entering into a conciliation agreement is to essentially allow the Oregon Department of Education to enter its final order, and it experiences that the preliminary order will just become the final order, except that the Department of Ed will include its own corrective action plan. The reason why I would recommend that the board consider and authorize negotiations related to a conciliation order is because it's an opportunity to consider remedies or steps that are more meaningful to the parties potentially. If you just get a corrective action plan out of the Oregon Department of Education, it won't have that customization. And so, and I don't know that it promotes healing for impacted people in the same way. So that would be my recommendation, but didn't want to get ahead of you in terms of no surprises. This is something that the board would want to later approve, but it is something where it takes a little bit of drafting and time to do a negotiation and to do the write-up on the conciliation agreement.
Can I ask a question about point of clarification on timeline here? Because I understand this is 2 to 3 years old, essentially, from the very first dates to now. So when did the ruling come from ODE? Is that September 1st, 2022? Or is that just something more recently saying that the conclusion, because I guess I'm trying to understand where this conclusion and it's triggering this action by the board.
It came out approximately 10 days ago.
Oh, okay.
And so, yeah.
Thank you.
I move that the Newburgh School District Board of Directors authorize legal counsel to negotiate a conciliation agreement with Rebecca Pyros, subject to final board approval.
Second.
Any further discussion? And I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we are down to,
The consent agenda, ESS
oh,
item.
I will yet again declare my conflict of interest, and I will not participate in any discussion, nor will I vote.
I will have to declare also potential conflict. As my wife is a teacher, she may be working for ESS at some point, so.
okay, so let's go back to, we need a motion to accept. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the ESS contract. Okay. Do we, okay, do we have a motion? Would anybody like to propose a motion?
I move that the Newburgh School District Board of Directors approve the ESS addendum as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain?
Aye.
You vote aye?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the motion passed unanimously without, with the, I'm sorry,
With 2 abstentions.
2 abstains due to conflict. Thank you very much.
Directors, Hayden and
Directors.
Nichols.
Yes, thank you. It takes a village, people, at this time. Okay, so then we do have one last item. I think this is just for information. Dr. Radich has given us sort of a draft of what a calendar moving forward looks like. And I will tell you, this is so, I can't tell you how excited I am. I think Director Woodward and I were hoping to get, sort of build on that from last year. So this will give us a sense of what some big items are that we have to address throughout the year. And just to give us all, it's just, there's no vote, just to let you know that this has been being worked on.
I remember last year there were regular presentations by different schools and principals. Is that something that we can schedule so that those administrators have an ample heads up?
Yeah.
It is, and one of the requests I think I heard from this board was that you wanted, while you heard from schools last year, you wanted to hear from some of the other programs that you hadn't heard from. So I can, maybe if you send me your interest, and we can go ahead and get those scheduled.
Okay, now's the fun time where we get to go around the room and hear updates from board members. Would we like to start with our students first?
I really enjoyed my summer break. I had a lot of fun traveling, and then I've really enjoyed getting back to school. And the FFA has started a lot of really good events. We're going to have a bake sale, and we're going to our leadership camp, and we're starting fundraising for the whole year, and we're really excited for all of that.
I also had a lot of fun traveling. I was on an exchange trip to Italy for a month. So it was a pretty amazing experience from that perspective. And since school started up, I mean, even a little bit before school started up, our theater program we're back in business. We've started rehearsing for the upcoming musical, The Lightning Thief, Percy Jackson musical. Come see it. That's what's been going on.
Thank you, guys. That's really exciting for both of you. I'm excited to hear more about that throughout the year. I'm just wishing everyone a great first month of school. I know it is an adjustment for everyone. And while I know the district is working so hard on communication, there are still, I think, families and parents out there that have questions and have confusion. And I think in times like this of transition, beginning of school year, just everything kind of going on in our world, I would encourage our school families to seek their communities. We have really beautiful communities at our schools. Your administrators and your office staff hold all the answers. They really do. So I encourage families who are new to our district or new to their schools to get to know their schools and seek out that community, because I think that's a really wonderful way to be involved in your children's education. I'd also like to give a shout out to the parent groups and the parent organizations at each school. I know that they are already meeting, already recruiting, and already hard at work. And they do some really beautiful work as well. I think that's it.
Thank you. It was fun to be out at Dundee the first night they let in the students and the parents, and the teachers had obviously been working overtime, way overtime, to get it set up, even though, you know, they hardly had any work time. And so, you know, several of the teachers said, well, I've been here every day since they let us in the last 10 days, and the library was already pretty well arranged. And I mean, that's a lot of unpacking of books. So thank you to the Dundee staff for all the move, but also every other school, school building. Yeah, I know that the teachers put in a lot of time before they were required to be there and to be ready for students. And a thank you for all the teachers and staff. And it was just fun to see the little children come in, and they were bringing their school supplies, and to get, you know, how excited they were to be back in the school and how proud the community is of that new building. And so that's something that's really to celebrate this school year.
I got to attend the Dundee opening as well as Ewing Young back to school night, which it's so much fun to see the littles coming in, and they're so excited to be back in the building with all their supplies and running to see their friends and find their desks. And Mrs. Wired's class, they were already filling out forms that were on their desks. And, you know, for kids to see their new teachers, but then run into the classroom of their older, previous year's teacher. And then, of course, you know, the Dundee Elementary School, just watching the awe and the smiles on people's faces, adults as well, as to see the new space. And prior administrators came who had a role in making that happen, which I was very appreciative of. And then I don't know what day it was, but if I direct your attention to the sign behind us, the high school had a welcome back for teachers, and it felt to me like people were coming into summer. This was kind of a weird analogy, like they were coming into summer camp and seeing all the people that they remembered from last year's summer camp, and the energy, the band was out there, the cheerleaders were out there. And for what this district has experienced, and the grief and the heartache, to see all that joy and excitement was just really meaningful. And Mark Brown, oh, Mark, he put together the most fabulous video that starred our very, famous Dr. Radich. I would really encourage everybody to see it because it was really funny. But at the point of it was, we're bringing joy back. We are back in the building. We are focusing on education. We are supporting everybody. And that was just a really wonderful thing to see. So many people that had signed this, and it just is a reflection of the community that is serving our children. And it just warms my heart. And it's the things that remind me of the importance of why we're doing the work we do in a board meeting for 5 hours a night. So I'm just excited. This is going to be a great year.
Also, just want to echo, excited about the beginning of school. Football season's awesome. I'll probably go to a couple of the Newburgh games when they're not in conflict with when I have to work. But also wanted to, I really appreciated the presentation today from Amy Stevens and Dr. Turgeson. We got a lot of the unsung heroes of our district. We talk about, we're talking about all these things we can do from a policy level, but these are the boots on the ground. These are the people that are, it's literally life-saving work. And I just really wanted to give a shout out to them because, not every district is so fortunate to have people like that there that are doing these interventions, especially in a community like ours that's been touched by tragedy. So, just really wanted to appreciate that they were here and give them another shout out.
I have a little bit of a list because I missed last one. There was one that I really wanted to say or convey last year or last month's meeting. We had a former student and lacrosse coach that passed late July. And I know it's well past time, but I just wanted to recognize that he was definitely important to a lot of kids in our high school. I think he graduated in 2016 and came back and be assistant coach to Brian Wood in the high school lacrosse. So that was a big loss. Kind of on the same vein, and thoughts and prayers to schools communities impacted by the violence of last week. It's just sad to hear and always see, but unfortunately, it's just become more day and day, and I hate to see that. One thing I'm advocating for parents, especially at the high school level, probably parents and students actually at the high school level, and more probably junior seniors targeting maybe, is I would like you to convey your concerns or positive, I guess. Convey your thoughts on trimesters. Already 5 days in the school week, I've already gotten 2 or 3 different concerns about how trimesters are impacting our seniors. That due to, and I'm not trying to call it out, but the Honor Society and the programs they try to push, that they have to drop music or they have to drop performing arts because they think they have to take an AP class to get onto the Honor Society. And I'm not discounting the Honor Society. That's just a very specific example. I think it does a lot of great good for the United States and through all the education. But that's just a very specific example where with our trimesters, our upperclassmen are having to basically choose an AP class or something they've loved and maybe have done since middle school. And all of a sudden their last year, they can't do it. And that's just, it's concerning. So I would love for anybody that would want to convey their thoughts on that to send emails to the board. Because I think this is a larger discussion that we need to address maybe for next year, if trimesters do really work and if they're advantageous to our upperclassmen. I understand how they might work fiscally and maybe better on the fiscal front. But I don't know if it's for the good of the kids, especially the kids that love to do a lot of extracurricular stuff. So that's one thing.
Can I ask you, do you think it would be helpful to have our amazing surveyist in the school to do a survey and have like sort of a uniform, process for that? I know that I would echo some of your concerns. The trimester thing just kind of was basically said we need to do this, and I don't disagree with your comments. So I'm just wondering if maybe a survey would be a good way to.
Survey could be a good way, but I think then we're going to have to also, I think as the longer the discussion goes, I think it's going to have all parties and the superintendent, be it our interim or our new interim, will have to weigh in, and possibly administrators. Again, it was just a concern. If she wants to, she can. I don't want to overload your plate over there.
Well,
you're a busy volunteer. So I was just saying, if this is a topic of concern, the easiest way is just to email the board. So, appreciate all the teachers and staff that have done the hard work to get this year up and running. With that, and kind of what one of our student reps is talking about, fundraising, because of the class cuts, or not class cuts, because of the financial cuts, we had to do a lot of field trips are now dependent on fundraising. So I'm advocating that the community go out and help support the programs so they can do some field trips. And some of them are just the standard, hey, we're going to go to districts and do band competition. That's still going to cost, I know the figures I heard is about $1,000 just for a day. And so that's not, light money, but you add that to all the different programs out there, it costs a lot of money. So just go out there, support your fundraisers and all the kids fundraisers out there. And the last thing is I love that the school is in session and hope our kids have a successful year. So.
I want to shout out the Joanne Austin staff and PSO. It was really awesome getting to do the back to school night there or day and see some of the changes that have been made and see how they're all just doing incredible work to make sure that any of those I guess tense moments are not conveyed to the kids. They were in just amazing spirits. It was, again, great to see all the little kids run and find their friends and had an excellent little playground event for everybody to hang out with afterwards. And then, Dad had on. It's been a great start to the school year. Really impressed by all the communication. Buses seem to be starting off strong. I've heard a few concerns that maybe should be addressed, but I think considering everything that's going on, just really excited that this year's starting off so great. So thank you to district office staff and all the staff and administrations at the schools for making this all happen for us.
Trevor, I know your voice is kind of strained. Do you have anything you would like to speak about?
Yeah, I just have a couple of things. Hey, unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the last special meeting. I didn't have Wi-Fi, but I did go back and watch the meeting. My hope tonight was to have an open and transparent conversation about some serious accusations on a board member that were levied. Now, those were, kind of veiled accusations, if you will. And I appreciate Director Allen and Director Hayden's thoughtful questions regarding the serious decision to take away some of the roles and responsibilities of the board as a whole and put them into a single person's hands. But I had a lot of questions pertaining to the decisions and what led up to the decisions. Unfortunately, the board as a whole decided not to allow that conversation to take place. I think for those of you that have been on the board for a while, you realize that it's kind of an awkward way how government public meetings work, but discussions are that opportunity to have an open and transparent conversation. So I guess I would just maybe have you reconsider it when a board member request to add something to the discussion items. I'll leave that at that. On a lighter note, I'll say that we got our exchange student from Germany. He arrived from Cologne about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he is Cologne, Germany. Awesome student. English is wonderful. He's well versed in a lot of different subjects, and we just love having him and look forward to exposing him to a lot of different American things, and hopefully he can check off many of them, which he already has. We've taken him camping. The neighbor's taken him fishing. He actually caught a 20-pound coho salmon this last weekend. So very excited to have Lewis here. And if you see him around, say hi to him. And then I'll put in a sorry, my brain's not working too good tonight with this cold. what I'm saying is that there's always a need for host families in the exchange program. I don't know if any of you have done that yet, but it's a great opportunity and there's a huge need there. I know this year they were looking for host families. Sometimes they commit to host or to having the exchange student without having a host family. And that means sometimes people will stand up to do it temporarily on a 6-week basis, but there really is a need there for host families. It's an enriching experience for not just the student, but the family as a whole. So for those of you that are listening, that may have considered or haven't considered, I think it's a great opportunity. And this will be our third exchange student. Our first one was in 2019 and 2020, and she was from Milan, Italy, and we still keep in touch with her, and she was actually out for 2.5 weeks this year to visit. So that's it.
Dr. Radich, do you have something you'd like to add?
Just briefly, want to thank Claudia and Galen and Christine for being here tonight. Thank you for your support and all the work that you do behind the scenes. I've had the privilege of being in all 6 elementary schools, visiting classrooms and watching students actually doing schoolwork. 1 middle school, and then I've got the high school and Catalyst and so forth to do yet. Tomorrow I'm headed over to the transportation department to visit with Bobby and her team, talk about transportation services and a couple hiccups that we've had, but frankly, a very, very smooth opening for first student. And thank you to their drivers. I had an opportunity at Edwards when I was there. I was came close to dismissal time and had an opportunity to introduce myself to 3 or 4 of the bus drivers and ask them why they did what they did. And they just lit up when those students got on the buses. And that's another group of really hardworking folks, very carefully making sure they knew every kindergarten child needed to be. And I can remember back in the day when kindergarten children would fall asleep on the bus in the back seat. You didn't know they were there for several hours. So they were very, very conscientious. One of the things, we had a really good meeting this morning with teaching and learning. We're going to be working with our K-12 principals to bring back what we call some really core programs. The Teaching and Learning Council, our data team. These are infrastructures that we need to improve our teaching and learning in the school district. And for some reason, over the years, those systems have eroded, and they're the core of what we do. We seem, for example, reading is a good example. We have some evidence that reading hasn't moved along at the rate that we would like. And we have a number of reading interventions, but we're concerned now that maybe our core program isn't as strong as it should be. And we need to find out why and what we need to do about it. So I'm excited to get at least this part kind of mapped out so my successor can move forward with whatever he or she wants to do. But we're going to talk to our staff here pretty soon. But also we'll need to engage the board in this work because this is your work. Other than all the other things we talked about tonight, this is the critical reason why we're really here. And I think last I met with both associations this week. One's just our routine kind of contract maintenance with one group, and the other I met with the president of the NEA just to kind of problem solve some issues, and really so pleased with their spirit of collaboration and sincerity in working through issues and doing those quickly and in a very timely manner. One of the outcomes of this, we were talking about professional development for our classified employees and how they can actually design those trainings and be the leaders and deliver those trainings to their colleagues. What I learned in discussing this with the classified staff is and with some of the teaching staff, the positive outcome of that furlough day after Labor Day was that they actually liked that, and they figured next year we could build that into our calendar, not as a furlough, but as our professional development and not start school till Wednesday like we did this year, but that we could bring the entire district staff together and they would design the professional development ahead of time. So we're excited about that concept. I don't know if that's going to go forward or not, and I haven't talked to a lot of people about it, but I was surprised at the positive reaction to how that actually began this year. So I think that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for sticking with it and looks like we might get home before 10. Meeting adjourned.